this episode of AR viewer request, I have to finish 2 laps of the Nürburgring Nordschleife in a car that makes more than 450 horsepower, with no slick tires, close to no steering assist, no weight reduction, only sports brakes, and no glitches. Sounds pretty casual. But there is a twist. I have to use tilt controls. And I have never used them in my life before. Whoever's watching this now must have clicked on the thumbnail because they either subscribe to my channel or they know something about tilt controls. Yes. I am using tilt controls for the first time in my 8 years of playing mobile racing games. This one has been requested by a viewer, who didn't seem to have a good time with tilt controls by the look of things, and therefore decided the best course of action was to make a small-time, underpaid YouTuber to suffer the same fate as them. Obviously, I'm not blaming you guys for your requests. I love you guys all, and I have to consider that a large portion of my viewers are still too young to have a thick enough wallet to donate to me out of pity. Relatively. But when I see some big YouTubers getting paid handsomely to get tortured, it kind of makes me contemplate my position as a plebeian YouTuber with a puny 290-something subscribers. Like, why would I use this horrible text-to-speech voice that I'm going to use during the entire video? I had to use it, guys, because I am not revealing any of my anything including voice anytime soon. That's something a 1 million subscriber YouTuber should do. Besides, in this day and age, protecting personal information is so important. Don't get hacked, guys, don't get exposed. If I was a big YouTuber, I would insert a NordVPN sponsor ad right here, but since I am a non, I will just move on. Anyway, for 8 years, I've played with directional button controls, steering controls, but never with tilt controls, ever. Honest to bog, I didn't have any button set up for my tilt control screen on Assoluto Racing before making this video, because I was never planning to use it. Why though? It's a pretty popular control, you might ask. Why? Because this is a mobile game. My phone in itself is a rectangular-shaped controller. It is not a console game where the controllers and screen are separated. With this in mind, I don't use tilt control for the same reason why sim racing gamers don't use their monitors to steer their favorite racing cars in Assetto Corsa. For the same reason why racing drivers on every corners, or any drivers for that matter, don't tilt their heads 45 degrees like your angels trying to figure out why you gobbling down their food every morning when really you are shoving Cocoa Puffs in your mouth because you're late for work. If I haven't made this clear enough yet, let me reiterate, in tilt controls, I have to literally turn this little world on its head to steer. See, mobile racing gamers have it worse than PC sim racers with their sophisticated direct drive wheel setups and triple monitors. We have to rely purely on the position of the car in relation to the surrounding scenery coming towards the car to figure out when to steer and how much we should steer. This part is somewhat true for the PC sim racers as well, as they do not have the so-called butt feeling or the natural G's that real racers can take advantage of while sitting in their vehicles. But PC gamer can at least have something called force feedbacks that tells them when to straighten out their steering lock of their Logitech wheel before they oversteer into oblivion. Granted, their games are more realistic and challenging in terms of physics, but it feels more natural and takes less additional training to adjust to the mechanics of the car than mobile game. When the game is true to how real cars behave, a racing driver can easily adjust to the game because the muscle memories are already there. So what about mobile racing games? Lol. Get bent.
Get bent, idiot.
Plus we have smaller screens. When I use tilt controls, the image of the car and the scenery moves around quite dramatically, altering all the reference points from which I can decide the amount of steering input. If I want my car to stay aligned with my view, I have to move my head around, perfectly in sync with the movement of my phone. In short, I cannot drive. Some people I've talked to use it religiously. They say that it makes them feel like they're really driving their cars, presumably because holding their mobile devices like steering wheels and rotating them has the same motion as rotating the steering wheels on real cars. Which I don't understand, because you can't feel the steering. But steering is literally not fixed to anything. So, what do I say to them? Absolutely nothing. We're all built different, we feel the world differently, and people can have preferences. If they like it, then they like it. I respect them for being able to do what I can't. I can ignore the tilt control option in my own games forever and let them have fun. Now if you don't mind, I am going to use steering controls and have fun in my own zone. Thank you for watching this video, if you are reading this. If you are listening to this, it means I haven't distracted you enough, and you still want to watch me crash. I have to do 2 laps of the Nürburgring, with tilt controls, in a car that matches the requirements given by the said viewer. But there is a problem. When I plan videos, I have to consider whether the ideas are going to make an entertaining video or not. You have to have some merit, or say, a risk, to make the viewers wonder what's at stake and make them stay until the end to find the outcome. Obviously I was going to crash a lot, because this is Greek to me. There was no way I was going to not crash. But the viewers have better things to do than sitting through a 25-minute video of me constantly kissing the barrier every 30 seconds. I could make a meme video that ends when I crash, but not only does it look lazy for me, but it was impossible anyway because the condition given was that I should finish 2 laps of Nürburgring. I should at least have a video evidence. So, I thought the best way to make something that works for both the viewers and myself was not this, but just driving head-on into the problem. I am someone who believes in trial by fire. I picked the hardest challenge at first so that the following ones will be easier to endure. I firmly believe that if you don't feel any fear before starting each day's practice run, you haven't practiced hard enough yesterday. I decided I should drive my Kirby on tilt controls. This is the monster I use to simulate driving overpowered race cars in torrential rain plus not so optimal track conditions and you're stuck on slicks. It is maxed out in terms of power, and is set up to create heavy oversteer both on and off throttle. Notice I cranked the diff excel down to 0%, but having 100% diff on these cars doesn't necessarily mean that it will be harder to drive. If anything, having it on 0% will make predicting the power oversteer more difficult. Because there will be a slight delay between my throttle input and the torque trying to send the rear end sideways. Not that being able to predict it will make any difference. Anyhow, because I am hardcore, I will also made it a goal to not crash at all. Before this point in the track, I didn't even reach at and back proper. I wasn't using steering assist as usual, so I have no idea whether using steering assist might make the tilt controls more comfortable to drive, but like I said, I am hardcore and I didn't turn them on. I essentially did 3 laps of this because I thought I'd test some different sensitivity settings, which didn't help much. Usually, my standing start lap on this car is 7-minute 30s, and it can go up to 8 minutes if I am strict on realistic, grit driving only policy. After crashing quite a lot of times and doing 2 horrible laps, I could have just called it quits and made this a video. But, since I'm an idiot, I decided to try and drive like this on every drivetrain. That means rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, and all-wheel drive. So I moved on to the next car, the Rough Center, because that one definitely didn't count. Although it says it makes 469 horsepower, it really feels more like 369 in this game, and the power curve is so flat, just like I said in my other video. When I am driving it on steering, it's so fun and controllable, as you can see. I can slide it around and be pretty precise with it. Despite all of this, it did not help me get over the tilt controls. I did crash less than the 370ZO, which should not come as a surprise, since Yellowbird is not a monster like people think it is. Despite its reputation for being a difficult car, Center is like 100 meters down the difficulty ladder than the 370Z I just drove. I noticed that if I gradually tilt my phone, the car eventually turns into the corner too much, and when I steer into the opposite direction to balance it out, it was already too late. So I started giving it small staccato movements so it gives me the controls I want, and that way I could keep my screen level to see where the car was going. I think it kind of worked. But all it did was removing this tilt control gig even further from the steering feel of real cars. Next, I tried the Peugeot. The car name I cannot remember because this car is so forgettable, but it absolutely follows the guidelines given to me by the viewer. It has 500 horsepower but it's also all-wheel drive. I never cared about this car, so I couldn't be asked to modify it. It has no fancy brakes, no fancy suspensions, no slick tires, but it comes with semi-slick as standard, which was great. It was way more comfortable to drive. I didn't have to worry about spinning the rear wheels or oversteering in any way, shape or form, but as you can probably expect, I crashed many times regardless. I was wrecking every car's left and right so far, erasing all hopes of not crashing a single time within 2 laps of the Nordschleife. The only hope I had left was the front-wheel drive import car, the Advan Civic. This had to be unstoppable. It has downforce, no archaic rear-wheel drive to mess with the balance. And did I mention downforce? Everything had to go smooth and great. So in conclusion, I failed. I can see why some people leave angry reviews on Assoluto Racing's Google Play Store page, saying that the cars are too oversteery and they crash all the time. The cars are objectively too understeery, don't get me wrong. You will not be able to do this on a real car without it violently oversteering, and sending you into a deep financial crisis, or a coma. It would also explain why most of AR's cars doesn't fishtail like real cars, because if they did a tilt control, users would have a very hard time trying to figure out what they are seeing before they could even try to control the cars. Also, the cars seem to correct most of the oversteer when you keep the steering at neutral, and at this point you get what I am trying to say. The tilt control's fundamental faults, you know, not being able to feel the car with your floaty steering that is somehow too twitchy at the same time, and not having a fixed reference points to see where you're going. We'll see the new players veer off the track and get absolutely wrecked before they could say jack brabham no matter what they do. The cars are simply unpredictable. What's even worse, I had even less angle to work with compared to the touch steering controls. Now, even though it is purely a visual thing, touch steering gives you 90 degrees lock on each side, and it gives you the illusion that you have to pull it with some authority to keep it locked in this position, especially when the car is understeering, which is most of the time. On tilt controls, I couldn't even give it 45 degrees total. I mean, I know some real car manufacturers reduce the steering angles on their cars to give the impression that their cars have snappy and responsive steering, but they will have at least 800 to 900 degrees to work with from one full lock to the other. What am I supposed to do with less than 45 degrees? This was rigged. By the way, I am not trying to cast the blame on the tilt control users for the lack of more realistic physics on Assoluto racing. They might feel that steering control is more difficult. Like I said, difficulty is subjective, and I only pointed out the objective facts, which is you can't have relatively stable viewpoint in tilt controls, and that adds another confusion to the mix. There might be other contributing factors as well, but this is a commercial-free mobile game first and foremost. The devs have to make money instead of chasing the kids or clueless adults away using its difficulty, and one of the ways to keep them hooked to this game is to nerf the physics of the real world as we know it. Besides, the current physics is good enough to make you not notice anything wrong if you stay within the boundaries. That was my first time trying tilt controls. Hope you guys stayed until the end. Before you go, here are my other average videos you can fall asleep to. Use it as ASMR, sleeping pills, or any other purpose you see fit. I don't know you guys personally, so I couldn't care how you used it if I wanted to. Love all you guys. Bye.